All right, ladies and gentlemen, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be starting to look at and talk about what's called abstract art. So in order to create our geometric abstraction piece, we need to understand what abstract art is. Now, we're going to be talking about the following: what it is, how realism and abstract are different from each other, the types of abstract art, roots of abstract art, the history behind it. We're going to look at a couple of abstract artists that you may or may not have seen before, and we're going to have a small little conclusion. So, what is abstract art? Very simply put, abstract art is any art that is not realistic. Here we have two paintings painted in the mid to late 1800s. These are what we would term realistic pieces of art because you can see what exactly is happening. Here in the George Bingham piece, that's this piece right here, you have the fur traders descending down the Missouri River, 1845. You can tell they're on a river, there are people, very realistic. Here we have the chess players from 1876. Also, you could tell they're people, they're playing chess. It's exactly what it is. It's very realistic, and that's what it's supposed to be. Now, when we think of realism versus abstract, we have to talk about what realism is as well as what abstract art is. What we've been working on in class for the last month or two is what we would term realistic art or realism. It is the viewer's it is the artist's interpretation or representation of the world. It is how the artist puts the world around them on canvas. It expresses the outer world. This is expressing the world around them in very realistic fashion, very much like a photograph. It mimics the outer world in a variety of styles and techniques. There are several thousand different techniques, just as there are several thousand different artists who have painted in this style. And realism hopes to answer the question, what is it? You can look at a realism painting, ask yourself the question, what is it? And be able to answer it like that. Whereas abstract art presents the viewer the artist's reaction to the world. Meaning, this is what's on the canvas, what's on the paper is not what the artist sees, but rather what the artist thinks and feels about the world in everything from its complexities to its simplicity. It expresses the artist's inner world, it's the artist's feelings and thoughts. It expresses this inner world in a variety of styles and techniques and media, and there's all sorts of ways to express yourself. And when we look at abstract art, we hope it answers the question, what is it saying? Because if you look at a piece of abstract art and go, what is it? You can't come up with an answer. However, what is it saying can really help you understand the piece of art. Now, there are two types of abstract art. We've got objective, which is artwork with recognizable images. Here at the bottom left, we've got Picasso's, it's called Head from 1960. You can tell it's a head, it's a person, it's got two eyes, a nose, two ears, a mouth. Does a person really look like that? Absolutely not. But that's okay. On the right, you have Matisse's The Blue Nude from 1952. Also, we could tell it's a person, we could tell they're not clothed, but does it really look like a person? Another type of abstract art is what we call non-objective. This is artwork with no recognizable images, no people, no buildings, no trees or flowers. It is just paint on canvas, it is lines, it is shapes, it is colors. Here, the image below is Jackson Pollock's Autumn Rhythm from 1950. Now, the roots of abstract art, the history behind it. In the late 19th century, the traditional European concept of art was the imitation of nature. That was your realism, which was abandoned in favor of imagination and the unconscious. So in the 19th century, that's the 1800s, artists started to step away from what was real and what people could actually see. And you want to know why? They invented the camera. What's the point of taking a beautiful landscape and painting it on canvas when you can just take a picture of it? So artists said, well, if the camera can do my job, I need to find another way to make what I do important. And they did that by going into their imagination and their subconscious and really focusing on the paint and the lines and the colors on canvas. Now, what caused all this to happen, besides the camera? Some say that the concept was influenced by Russian artist Wassily Kandinsky around the year 1910. And this is one of his paintings here on the right. Others say that the movement began in New York when people really started to stop tolerating the social realism art produced after World War II and instead switched to abstraction. Here we have a Diego Rivera mural from the 1940s at the bottom, which really does promote very social aspects of realism of life. Now we're going to look at a couple of abstract artists. Here we have Wassily Kandinsky. He was born in 1866, died in 1944. We have two paintings of his on the right. One up top deals with very organic shapes and lines, whereas the one on the bottom deals with more geometric shapes. Wassily Kandinsky is considered one of the inventors of abstract painting. He began painting very realistically in his youth and eventually evolved into this abstraction. He believed in what he called the psychological and spiritual effects of color. He believed that color could relate to different forms of music, different instruments, different feelings. And he developed an art form in which shapes and colors alone became the important quality of the work. One of his more famous quotes is, "Paintings should represent a mood, not illustrate an object." Here we have Willem de Kooning, born in 1904, died in 1997. Born in the Netherlands, but he later moved to Manhattan in 1927. He became friends with art critic John D. Graham and painter Achille Gorky, who got him started with painting abstraction. He was, again, like Kandinsky, started off very realistic and then landed up moving more towards the abstraction later on in his life. He became very famous for his impact on the abstract expressionist movement in the 1940s and was later recognized as a leader of this movement in the 1950s. Jackson Pollock, born 1912, died 1956. Moved to New York to study at the Art Students League. This was a gathering of artists who would teach each other, who would paint together. And he worked for the Federal Art Project from 1938 to 1942. This was the time in U.S. history where the government paid artists to take pictures of the Depression, to paint posters, to really liven up New York by painting murals and really bring art into the government sphere. He invented what is known as the drip technique, or splatter painting as you guys like to call it. He made a killing doing this. This was his life. This was his work. He developed so many different techniques and really took the idea of the drip or the splatter and really brought it to the forefront of the art world. He is also the artist of the most expensive painting in the world in 2006. In 2006, his number 5 from 1948, that is not the painting on the right, by the way, that sold for $140 million. Then we have Pablo Picasso, born in 1881, died in 1973. Now, Pablo Picasso was born in Spain and was a child prodigy who was recognized as such by his art teacher father. He started painting at the age of 9 and really developed and continued painting all the way up until his death. He was recognized as the leader of Cubism, influenced by Einstein's theory of relativity. Picasso's work is all about wanting to truly represent a 3-dimensional object on a 2-dimensional surface, trying to take a 3D person and really getting them on that canvas. Now, he had several periods of his art, his rose and his blue period, again, like many other artists, very realistic, and eventually moved into the analytical or synthetic part of Cubism, which is a form of abstract art. The painting on the right here is part of his analytical time period. Now, what happened in the end? What is the conclusion of abstract art? Now, there is really no specific starting date of abstract art, much less an ending date. There is no, okay, the abstract art started in 1873 on May 4th and ended on, 1945 in this. It didn't work like that. The movement in all has really been over, but abstraction is now looked upon as just another equally beautiful form of art. There are many artists that still create abstract art today, and now they have taken the ideas of it and applied it to other things such as architecture. So what were the lasting effects? Abstract painting and art have influenced many people to not feel like they have to paint portraits and landscapes, but that they can just paint what they feel and make their work actually mean something to them. There's also now tons of buildings, bridges, stairs, and monuments that have been created with an abstract theme. Architecture on a whole has changed incredibly since abstract art was introduced.